Okay, so I've decided to document a Uship trip from start to finish to shed some light on what it's like to make money out on the road in your pickup truck. My name is Nicholas Johnson and this is the Space Warehouse. Previously, I made a video all about the booking process, so check that out up here if you want to see that in a little more depth. I am a motorsports photographer, and I had another trip planned up to Road America up in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin to shoot a mini documentary of the Gorilla Sticker endurance racing team. I like to drive to these gigs more than I like to fly because A, I can bring a lot more stuff a lot more easy, and B, my cargo trailer doubles as an office and a hotel while I'm up there at the race. A lot of these endurance races take place over a 3-day weekend. So step one was finding a couple loads going the same way I was, up the I-75. I start looking for loads about a week before I want to leave time for negotiation or outbidding other shippers. So I hopped on Uship.com and I put in where I was going. You have the option to have it search along your route rather than just from city to city. That way it'll show a lot more things that are just kind of on the same way as you're going. Although, as you'll see a bit later, you really open yourself up to some potential scheduling conflicts, as I did. I ended up booking a couple of antique cabinets going north from South Carolina, a couple of zero-turn lawnmowers in Georgia that were going all the way to Wisconsin, and then a Harley for the return trip. I don't usually go crazy with the amount of stuff I try to ship. I'm only really using Uship to just pay for the trip, pay for the gas and the food I'm gonna eat and the stuff I'm gonna do during my trip. I could have easily bid on a dozen more things and made 3 or 4 more stops in each direction if I really wanted to maximize the amount of money I was gonna make on this trip. Primarily, I'm a photographer. I just use Ushipping to make it a little more profitable. So, with a few things booked, I packed up my camera gear, hopped in my truck, and I went to go grab my trailer. I bought some vacant residential land a few years ago after my neighborhood association started being mean about having trailers in the driveway. And I'm really glad I did, because now I have 2 cargo trailers and a tow-behind RV that I need to park somewhere, and that would never fly in pretty much any neighborhood. At this point, the trip was officially on. One piece of advice, before you leave the house, make a master list of everything you want to bring with and check stuff off. Just occurred to me that I forgot my bathroom stuff. I got no toothbrush or toothpaste or soap. I'm gonna be gone for 4 days. My first stop was in South Carolina. I left in the middle of the day on a Wednesday with the intention of making it to that first pickup location, which turned out to be a flea market kind of off the beaten path. They were closed, but the woman I was delivering for worked it out with the owner of the storage place to get me in there and help me drag out these ornamental cabinets. So, with a little bit of a struggle, because they were an inch shorter than the opening of my rear door, I managed to get them shoved in, covered up, and strapped down. And it was at this point where I realized I made a really stupid mistake in my planning, because I had booked a load in Georgia for 2 riding lawnmowers. Those were going all the way up to Wisconsin, but these cabinets were only going 3 hours up the road. So I decided I would just grab these cabinets and then bippity-bop on back down to Georgia, and then I'd have to just zigzag my way back up the country. Well, I didn't do the real math for mileage. So you can set the search parameters on Uship to allow a certain number of miles to deviate from your path. Let's say you're willing to drive an extra 50 miles from your original intended path so that you can expand the number of available loads on the list. But these 2 loads just happen to pretty much be exactly an extra 50 miles in the opposite and opposing directions, which meant to go get the mowers, I had to go 50 miles one way and then 50 miles back, so I was 100 miles out of my way, and then still an additional 50 miles to drop off these cabinets, and then straight back up to Wisconsin. I was going to run out of daylight and mess up the timing for the rest of my trip, so I decided to cancel the mowers. I hate canceling a load. It looks bad on your profile, and it makes people have to do extra work to find another shipper, plus I missed out on $500. But I had a deadline to get to that race, and it just wasn't going to work. So, on to the cabinet drop-off, 3.5 hours north. I got to their neighborhood, and that was a pleasant surprise. One of the nicer places I've ever had the pleasure of making a delivery. Really pretty houses. Unfortunately, what this very nice lady had forgotten to put into her ad was that these cabinets needed to end up on the 2nd floor, and they expected me to do that. I don't normally do deliveries all the way into the final resting place of the items. There is a special exclusive shipments section of Uship that has from room to room delivery, you'll go into their house and grab something, and when you deliver it, put it all the way into their house again. It just comes with all sorts of possibilities for something to break or for too much time to be lost, which is what happened here too. This is why I usually just stick to cars, motorcycles, and 4-wheelers. But these people were so nice and so willing to help that I agreed. And so the 3 of us wrestled these 3 big antique delicate as cabinets up into their master bedroom. He did tip me $50 at the end, which probably paid for most of the food I ate on the way up, so that was nice. After that, it was basically just on my way to Elkhart Lake. The rest of my trip was with an empty trailer. I already had a motorcycle booked for the trip back, so with that and these cabinets, the price of my trip was already covered. So I was fine with just the relief of knowing I was no longer in the care of other people's things. Now it was just time to relax and sit back and enjoy the road. Love's Truck Stops get pretty much all my money on these trips. They have a loyalty program for cheaper gas, they always have super clean bathrooms, and you can even pay a few bucks and take a shower on the road. And they sell these little packs of fancy cheese and meat and crackers. They're pretty much like classy Lunchables. They're delicious, and I ate a bunch of these over the course of my trip. So I got to the track, I did the race stuff, and on Sunday night after a team dinner, I was on my way back home. I wanted to get far enough south on the first leg of this trip so that I wouldn't freeze sleeping in the back of the truck.
Who knew that it's still winter in April?
By this time, I had set up a second pickup of what's called a bachelor's chest in this really large antique store. But first I was off to Illinois to pick up a Harley. And of course, this place didn't open till 10 a.m., setting me back a couple hours on my trip. So I had a nice leisurely morning just hanging out in my truck before I got to roll this big boy up into the back of my trailer.
The 2012 Ford Super Duty Crew Cab can accommodate one 6-foot adult, slightly at an angle in the back seat.
I got that strapped down and headed just about 30 miles east to this very large and very busy antique megastore. The man there, Jeffrey, was very nice. However, he had forgotten about our meeting time and did not have this chest ready when I got there. So I sat, and a few minutes turned into an hour before Jeffrey finally came back to me, kind of looking at his feet, and admitted that he and his staff just couldn't find the thing. He didn't want to waste any more man hours looking for the thing, and I didn't want to waste any more time in Illinois, so we both agreed to just cut our losses, and I left empty-handed. That's actually the first time that's ever happened to me. I actually show up at a place and leave without the thing. It wasn't all bad though, because that was going to put me all the way to the East Coast. That was dropping off in Jacksonville, so I was going to have to take I-95 down to Florida, and it's like 5 hours less to go down 75. So I did get to cut my trip a little shorter, although again, lost out on a few hundred more bucks. But still, my trip was paid for, so this was all just extra bucks. Fun fact, all of the interstate highways in the United States going north and south have odd numbers. Low numbers starting in the west and going higher as you go east. I think I-5 in California is the lowest one, and I-95 is all the way on the East Coast. Likewise, the east-west interstate highways are all even numbers, low numbers starting in the south, getting higher as you go north. The motorcycle was going to Louisville, Kentucky, which fortunately I was going to make it to in the same day, but unfortunately it was going to be after they closed, because I lost all that time in the morning waiting for the antique guy, and because of that late 10 a.m. start time. Mike at the Louisville Harley dealership was nice enough to allow me to quietly drop it around back by the loading dock in the dark of night so I could continue on my trip south. After that, I was driving with an empty trailer again, so it was just smooth sailing back down to Florida. I'm sure I could have hopped back on the app and found some more stuff going south from Louisville, but I was really tired of making plans and sleeping in the back of a truck. Plus, all my expenses had already been covered, and I got paid to take photos while I was in Wisconsin, which was the main purpose of the trip anyways. So I just took a beeline and charged on the rest of the way down south. I occasionally take these trips with my toy hauler RV rather than the cargo trailer. It does have a cargo space in the back, but it's only 13 feet deep, where my car hauler cargo trailer has a 24-foot inside space. So that choice is just a matter of easy shipping versus easy living. The cargo trailer is easier to roll stuff up into because it's lower to the ground, and it's bigger. This time I initially thought that I was going to bring those giant mowers alongside those big cabinets, so I thought I needed all that space. But in hindsight, I definitely could have benefited from having a furnace and a stove and a fridge and a real bed, but you know, you win some, you lose some. And that pretty much wraps it up. I got a ton of footage for the next few photography videos I'll be making at home, and had another pretty fun adventure, and probably my last road trip in a while since my Art World production gig is starting back up after a 13-month hiatus. I hope this gave some insight into how these trips can go if you're going to use Uship just to pay for the trips you're already taking, or maybe if you want to try to make it a full-time gig. Both are easily doable, especially if you already own a heavy-duty truck and a trailer. Even a truck alone works just fine. There's almost always a boat that needs to be tugged up and down the East Coast. but don't think the trip is always just going to go without any problems. This one was particularly plagued with unexpected delays, and of course it was because I happened to be filming throughout the whole process, but I mean, I take plenty of trips where nothing goes wrong and I make triple as much money as I did here. But if you have any questions at all, just leave them in the comments and I'll tell you what I know. Goodbye. Where my car hauler cargo trailer is, I can't say that.